Well, good morning and good afternoon for some. My name is Jennifer Joyce, and I'm the Regional Vice President for Sales for the Western Territory here at Conducive Technologies. And we are talking with you today about how we can achieve a 2x faster SQL experience for your environment. So this webinar is going to be broken out into two parts. The first part is really what I'd call the thought leadership portion, where we just dig in under the hood a bit, get into the technology stack, explain some of the I/O inefficiencies that are occurring, some of the I/O degradation issues that are happening in the environment, especially if you're running SQL Server, particularly if you virtualize that environment. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening under the hood that's stealing the underlying IOPS and throughput that's causing your underlying sub-storage system to really kind of have to churn and work a lot harder than it should be. And ultimately, why you might be getting less performance than you actually should be on your SQL workloads. There really are some inherent IO penalties that are occurring. We'll highlight a couple of them and give you that overview. For the second part of the webinar, we're going to just dive in very, very quickly, no more than a 10-minute overview of what our software does. Its Velocity is the feature software of the day. It is set and forget software utility that runs silently in the background on Windows servers, and it is tackling those I/O inefficiencies that we're talking about at the source. Now, obviously, kind of the compelling question here is, what other ways can you get that performance out of SQL servers besides just buying expensive hardware and throwing more and more hardware at the problem? Well, we have a very unique solution that we're going to talk about today that can actually solve that. It's a 100% software approach. And after the webinar, we're going to be giving each of you a complimentary NFR. It's more than a $500 MSRP value because ultimately the proof is in the pudding. Now, I've got a couple of cohorts with me on the phone today. The first person I'd like to introduce is my partner in crime, Howard Butler. Howard is the Senior Director of Systems Engineering here at Conducive Technologies. And for any of you car fans out there, if you are ever on a one-on-one call with Howard, not only does he specialize in accelerating performance in computers, but he's also a race car instructor. So he specializes in accelerating fast cars whenever he gets the chance as well. So Howard?
All right, Jennifer. Well, thanks very much. And, by the way, don't let her title fool you guys. She's quite technical as well, as you see as we get rolling along here. Now, one of the things I do want to mention, Jennifer, is that we'd like to make this session interactive if we can. So, guys, if there's a question that you have and so forth, please go ahead and just take the time, type it up, throw it in there in the question box, and we'll get to it either during the presentation or at the end when we have a short Q&A session. So Jennifer, thanks very much for having me.
That's great. Now I want to take a chance to introduce another partner we have on the phone, and this is Converge One. We've had a chance to work with Converge One for many years, and a fantastic partnership we have going. So Chris is here on the call with us today. Chris?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jennifer, and good morning to everybody. I'm Chris Baconis. I'm the sales director for Converge One here in sunny Southern California, and I'm just going to take a moment to do a high-level overview of Converge One and the value that we bring our customers. Next slide. So when we talk about Converge One, we like to start with our mission, our vision, and our values. We are 100% customer-driven. We're 100% customer-driven, and we start, culturally, we start with the yes. We decide locally. We want to do right by our customer, and ultimately, our mission is to create innovative solutions that give customers the experience that they deserve. Next slide. When we talk about Converge One at a glance, we were founded in 1993. We're about 3,000 employees strong, and we have 2,000 engineers in our organization. We love to leverage that customer experience and our engineering experience to really create and solve, not create, but solve complex problems for our customers in the data center. Next slide, slide 5. What makes us unique about Converge One is the amount of consulting, professional services, and cloud services we deliver to our customers. So we're about a $1.7 billion company, and we do 54% of our revenues in services. So we're about almost $1 billion services company today. Slide 6. We have a long-standing customer relationships. We have, it's actually over 12,000 customers today. We're in 73% of the Fortune 100. We're in 53% of the Fortune 500, and then 44% of the Fortune 1000. So there's about 1,000 customers in that large customer segment, and then the remaining amount of our customers, the 11,000 additional customers, are really mid-market customers that are between 1,000 and 10,000 seats. Slide 7. We're about team, so we work internally as a team, but we like to extend that relationship to our customers, and we like to think of ourselves as an extension of our customers' team, working with your data center experts, solving complex problems in the data center. Next slide. We have a 5x4 go-to-market strategy. The 5 is our core practice areas, which is customer experience, unified communications, cybersecurity, data center, and enterprise networking. The 4 portion of the 504 is our service delivery model, which is cloud, maintenance services, managed services, and professional services. More recently, we acquired, last year we acquired a company that specialized in AWS and Azure consulting services. So many of our customers are either on the journey to cloud or are thinking about the journey to cloud. And at Converge One, we want to partner with our customers to help them on that cloud journey. We have 2 cloud offerings. We have C1CX, which is our unified communications and contact center cloud. C1CX is built around the disciplines of Avaya and Cisco. So we can help customers manage on-prem. We can actually manage in a colo for a customer, or we can move customers to our shared private cloud or a private cloud setting, which is a data center infrastructure that we manage. C1MX is our multi-cloud practice. So for multi-cloud, we like to sit down and help our customers look at the application stack and help them decide whether the solution is going to be a software as a service. Does that application stack belong in Azure, Amazon, Google, or does it reside best in a private cloud setting? Regardless, we recognize here at Converge One that cloud is a journey. It's a customized journey for our customers. Our customers have unique needs, and we want to be that consulting partner for cloud with our customers. So our engagement methodology is quite unique also. So WAVES is a proprietary methodology on how we engage with our customers. The W in WAVES stands for workshop. It's the way that we initially engage with our customers. So if you remember back a few slides to the 5x4 practice areas, we actually have a workshop assessment for everything that we do. So we have it for Unified Communication Center, Contact Center, Security, Data Center, and more recently, we just added our new WAVES offering is around helping customers with ransomware. So we have a ransomware workshop, but the workshop is intended to be a structured interview with the customer. What do you have? What are your business processes? What are your people? And it helps us understand what you have, how you're using it, and the problems you're trying to solve. And we like to tell customers, you know, if we don't know your infrastructure equally as good or better than you do, then you know, we're not going to be in a position to make recommendations to you. So the last thing I want to talk about is Net Promoter Score. So some of you might be familiar with this, as this is more on the manufacturing side from a hardware and a software perspective. But Net Promoter is a third-party assessment of your customer base and their willingness to refer you to a colleague or to a friend. You can have a negative or positive Net Promoter Score. Anything from 0 to 50 is good, and then anything above 70 is considered world-class. When we look at the top brands in the industry, whether it be Hewlett-Packard, Dell, Cisco, Oracle, Avaya, NetApp, Juniper, you can see that on average, manufacturing tends to be about 33 points from a Net Promoter Score perspective, which is good. It's not bad. When we look at the largest brands in the industry, Apple, AWS, Google, they tend to fare a bit better. Apple being, you know, in the realm of world-class and excellent. But these are the biggest brands and what their customers think about them. At Converge One, we're extremely proud of the fact that we raised our Net Promoter Score from the low 60s to 70 last year, entering the realm of world-class services. So we share this with you because you can be assured that when we work with you and we engage in the project and we partner with you as an extension of your team, we're going to deliver a world-class solution. So I like to say Converge One is the services partner that helps you maximize your IT investment with those tier one vendors. And then the last comparison here is around service providers. So how do we stack up against the world of service providers? And you can see here with our 70 score, you can see where Oracle is, where IBM Global Services is, and the rest of the consulting world. Again, large, deep engineering capacity with world-class service delivery is what I wanted to share with you. So, Jennifer, that's all I had. I'm going to turn it back to you and Howard.
Great. I really appreciate that, Chris, and it's as always a pleasure to have you here with us today. And I think everyone on the webinar can see why we partner with Converge One. They are really a world-class organization. And talking a little bit about Conducive Technologies, let me just give you a very high-level intro to who we are. Some of you may not have even heard of us. So let me just tell you a little bit about our street cred and what we've been up to over these last 38 years that we have been in business. Yes, we are a 38-year-old software company. We are the 12th oldest software company in the world still in business. And we originally started out as a company known as Diskkeeper. So you may not have heard of the word Conducive, but you probably have come across Diskkeeper in your career and may have even used our defragmentation software on your hard drives back in the day. So a number of years ago, we innovated and brought some revolutionary intellectual property into the marketplace, and it was all about reducing the noisy and unnecessary I/O. And as it turns out, on any given SQL server, that's between 30 to 40% of all of the I/O traffic. It's just excess. That's stealing IOPS and stealing throughput. So, in fact, what we're doing is we're offloading 50% or more of the I/O that has to go down to storage today and helping to generate well above 2 times faster performance gains in your systems. In fact, velocity works so well that Gartner gave us a Cool Vendor of the Year tag. And right now we've got over 2,500 mid-market large enterprise customers using our software. Iterations or pieces or elements of our software are OEM'd by the likes of Samsung, Lenovo, Western Digital. So if you haven't heard of us, you've clearly heard of them. And additionally, we have a very, very close working relationship with both Microsoft and VMware. Now, and Howard, I think this is one of the big ones, especially in relationship to the nature of our webinar today about SQL, and you were involved with this directly, where Microsoft named us as the first, and I believe still only, software vendor, this is usually reserved for hardware vendors, that has been certified for their SQL I/O reliability program, and that's a pretty big deal.
You're right, Jennifer, and I do consider this a rather elite certification. Microsoft does have certain levels to make sure that other applications like ours are fully compatible with their software platforms. In this case, we're talking about SQL Server. And as you said, we're the only software vendor listed in this group, but we're in pretty good company with the likes of EMC and HP. And besides all of the testing that had to be done, we also had to go through a very rigorous panel of SQL experts to get past this. So Jennifer, as you can imagine, this is a pretty nice certification, if I don't say so myself.
Yeah, it really is. So let's jump right in here on the next slide and explain what's happening that's creating all this noise and unnecessary I/O traffic, and really what this I/O degradation issue is all about that's stealing this performance. Now, I want to give you a couple of opening slides very quickly just to kind of show you some interesting marketing research that we've done. Now, we've conducted what we think is the largest independent study of I/O performance done. We get over 1,000 IT professionals responding every year, and we ask this one very pointed question every year, which, we really want to know, with hard-hitting applications running on SQL, how many IT professionals out there running SQL environments have had performance problems so bad that they're actually getting complaints from either their external customers or their internal staff due to sluggish performance. It's like slow queries, slow performance, batch jobs taking too long, that kind of thing. And if you look at the graph, you're going to see that 28% of all organizations have raised their hand and said, yep, right here, that's us. We've got that, that performance complaint kind of environment. So that number keeps creeping up. Earlier years, the response rate was around 25%. Last year, it was 27%. Now we're at 28%. The problem isn't going away. In fact, it's getting slightly a little bit worse. So the likelihood is you're on this webinar because you're in that 28%. You're probably in very good company. And it's no surprise here that 1 in 4 organizations are actually having these types of issues. Now, we also asked another question here on the next slide, and that was, of all your IO-intensive apps that you support, which one is the worst? Which one are you challenged the most with and struggling to support on a performance basis? And SQL rose to the top. You can kind of see the word cloud idea is the most frequently mentioned word, gets the largest font, and that's really what jumps out of us. Now, it's interesting because of the inherent inefficiencies, not only in the Windows operating system, but in SQL, that seems to rise up to the top. 7 out of 10 customers who are new to Conducive take a look at us and buy our software initially for SQL. Now, that being said, we are a Windows-focused solution. And you can see here on the next slide, SQL is not all that we enhance. In fact, with our Citrix Ready certification testing, you can see some of the results here ranging from anywhere from 11% up to 90% performance gains. So there's a lot of workloads, whether it's Citrix, SQL, VDI, various other types of ERP, tough to support type applications that we can also see benefits in. SQL's the low-hanging fruit. It's kind of our sweet spot, though. So now let me jump onto the next slide. Now, I think the setup was kind of long enough here. So before I give you a picture of the technical second portion of the webinar of what's creating these IO degradation issues I've been talking about, I think it helps to start with a view of kind of the ideal state, the actual healthy IO profile that we're looking for. What is that optimal IO profile when you're getting that optimal performance? Now, as you can see here, and obviously this is a very rudimentary extraction, get some takeaways out of this, but I think that that immediate takeaway is that you see nice, large, clean, contiguous writes and reads here. You can see that you're getting a healthy payload of data with every IO operation. Kind of notice, how nice and sequential that traffic looks. This is really an optimal environment to get the best performance from your underlying flash, hybrid, or disk storage. Even if you're up in the cloud, this is still relevant. But the moment that you take a SQL server and you virtualize it, and obviously, SQL is running in that Windows context, you know that what you're seeing on this slide is not what you're going to be getting. Instead, you're going to get something that looks a lot closer to this here on this next slide. All right. Now, by taking a quick look at what you saw before to what you're seeing here, I think that the takeaway is pretty obvious. Suddenly, now in this environment, there are IO characteristics that are much smaller, more fractured, and random than they need to be. We call this kind of the death by a thousand cut scenario, where your underlying architecture is processing workloads, but ultimately having to work much, much harder than it really needs to. This is kind of like pouring molasses all over your flash storage or your hybrid storage, because now you're penalizing storage performance with what we call the perfect trifecta of bad storage performance: small, fractured, random IOs. These characteristics are death for performance. And this is true whether you have 100,000 IOPS to work with or you've only got 10,000 IOPS to work with. People use a very small percentage of the IO performance or capacity that they have, but it's what we're focused on is the part you're using. That 3%, 10% of the IO you're actually using could be going 30 to 40% faster minimum, if not more. Now, let's dig in a little bit more and see what's actually going on, okay? We have what we call two different IO penalties that are occurring. The first one I'm going to talk about is here at the bottom of the slide. It's what we've coined as the IO blender effect. Now, you've probably heard that term before. We actually helped Gartner coin that term a few years back, especially when virtualization was really coming across the landscape. And because, what the IO blender effect is the moment you virtualize and you've got more than one server on a host, you've got these VMs starting to add in, you lose the one-to-one relationship of server to storage. And, that was bad enough with the inefficiencies that these applications in the Windows operating system brings in. But once you virtualize, you really compound this problem. And before us, there's really no fix for this. As great as virtualization is for server efficiency, one of the biggest downsides is that it does add complexity to the data path. And the second that you add that second VM, the third VM, the fourth VM, guess what you're doing? You're amplifying the effects of that randomization even further and building on that IO blender effect and the drag that brings in. Now, this isn't real obvious to a lot of organizations because, the full performance penalty that they're experiencing with virtualization and that complexity that's getting added to the data path, we're all focused on the cost savings, reducing the footprint, increasing VM density while maintaining that delicate balance of performance. So we can't live without virtualization, but we could live without some of the performance degradation we've gotten because of it. And, because people have tended to virtualize slowly over time, sort of like getting in your car and turning up the radio, turning up a little more. Next time you get in your car, you're blasted out. You didn't realize how loud it was. You didn't realize how bad the problem was. Some people, though, turn the radio up all the way on the first shot. Like we have an example that we'll talk about right now, where they went from 0 to 60 on virtualization, and they basically flipped the switch and went from physical to all virtual overnight. And in those cases, this problem was super, super, super pronounced and obvious. And Howard, I know that you've done work with a particular environment. It was 2,200 servers at the time that were physical went virtual. And can you tell us a little bit about your experience there? This was with Christus Health, who's one of the top 10 largest healthcare providers in the country.
Yeah, well, Jennifer, thanks very much. And when they did their testing, they did so on individual systems. And they were expecting that when they went from physical to virtual, they'd get the same kind of performance. But when they actually virtualized all those systems, that didn't occur. What they ran into instead was significant performance degradation. And during their analysis, what they found is that it wasn't CPU, it wasn't memory related. It was simply a tremendous IO bottleneck, Jennifer. And that's what caused their issue. Now, their first reaction was, gee whiz, we're going to have to go out and upgrade all of our storage and perhaps go to an all-flash type of array to solve this issue. But before they did that, they had done some research, read about our software, got a copy of it, did some testing with our software, and we were able to solve all of those bottleneck performance issues. So Jennifer, rather than them spending $2 million for a hardware refresh, upgrading all of their flash or upgrading to flash type storage, we were able to save them that tremendous amount of money there.
That's fantastic. And, we've got their case study published up on our website. They're on over 2,500 VM nows across the enterprise. Just a really tremendous success story there. And, we'll kind of continue with this conversation here by moving up to the other kind of IO penalty that we have in the environment. There are two of them here. And, as tough as the IO blunder effect is, we have something upstream generated directly by the Windows operating system. There's this huge and severe inefficiency in the handoff of data between the Windows OS and the underlying storage. And there's no APIs that connect the two, so what Windows is doing is what Windows is doing. Storage can't come up and tell Windows to stop. And this creates a really serious problem because the Windows operating system is designed to write the reads, is designed to write and read with just 1 or 2 or 3 IO operations, minimal operations. But what happens is over time, Windows ultimately starts degrading in performance, and any given file breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces. That out-of-the-box performance, you lose it. And ultimately, you end up processing multiple IOs for a single file that really should just be written and read in one IO. So, Howard, I'd really appreciate it if you could just tell us a little bit more about what's actually happening here and why Windows is so inefficient in the handoff of that data.
Yeah, Jennifer, the Windows file system truly does take more or less a one-size-fits-all type of approach. And what I mean by this is that when a file gets created or extended, the Windows file system doesn't really know how big that file is going to be. So what it does, and again, this is on the logical side of the Windows system within the file system, is that it looks for the next allocation location. And if that file extension is bigger than that, it'll fill it up, and then it has to go and find the next allocation and continue on doing that until it's written all of the data. Well, each of those allocations, as you can imagine, is a separate individual and extra IO request. So now you're getting all of these small random IOs rather than a nice sequential IO type of traffic pattern. And later on, we're going to go into how we actually solve this. But as you see, now you're getting all of these small random IOs coming from the system itself. And if you were ever to look at the benchmark scores that storage manufacturers provide, they generally give you two, Jennifer. They give you random IO performance measurements as well as sequential IO. And you will always notice that the nice sequential IOs outperforms the random IO measurements. So if we can help force the file system to do a better job and process and issue these nice sequential IOs, you're definitely going to get the best performance out of your storage, Jennifer.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Howard. And, you know, a real good example of that is a case study that we also have on our website, University of Illinois. Their hardest hitting databases and their applications actually were Oracle and SQL, running those databases on the latest Dell servers. They had Dell Compellent all-flash arrays in their environment. And, you know, everything was running fine, but it had degraded over time. And they started missing some SLAs. So before they went to go and buy more all-flash arrays, to get the IAPs to meet those SLAs, they heard about us in their research of how to solve the performance, installed us, and boom, overnight, performance doubled. So it's a pretty neat solution and a neat way to go about things. Now, if you take a look at the next slide, the thing that we want to start addressing is how do we address this, right? The Windows I/O text, the I/O blender effect. Now, clearly, we're talking about this because we can do something about it. When you address the I/O on one individual server in a virtualized context, certainly that is going to help. But you still have all the pressure of the neighboring I/O. I kind of think of this as, you know, if you're in a neighborhood and all of these neighbors, all the VMs or the neighbors have their music cranked up way loud, no one's sleeping at night. What we want to do is, if one guy turns his music down, the other three are still blasting, still no one's sleeping. So we want to get everyone to turn the volume down on all of this excess, unnecessary, wasted I/O and effort and energy that's going in, and just streamline everything. So while it is effective to deploy just to a couple of your workloads that are most important, it's very, very valid, though, to try and address and reduce the noise from all of the sources, all the Windows VMs on that shared infrastructure. You think about what I was talking about earlier of adding complexity to the data path with virtualization. This is going to be what helps quiet that down. Now, another thing about where velocity installs is on the next slide here. And we like to call this affectionately the top of the stack slide. Points out two things really. Where velocity installs right inside the Windows operating system, that allows us to address these inefficiencies at the source and get rid of them at the source so that everything downstream isn't having to overwork and overcompensate for this inefficiency. The other thing on this slide that I really like to bring up is compatibility. So you have velocity is fenced by Windows. It's a 100% software application installed into Windows. When you think about it, there's no flavor of, you know, Windows for Pure Storage. There's no flavor of Windows for Nimble or Windows for Hyper-V or Windows for Citrix. Everybody else conforms to Windows and is compatible with Windows, as are we. So that lets us play nicely in the environment. So no matter your environment, we will be compatible. So those are just a couple of highlights I wanted to mention about the software, and then we can move on to the next slide here. So there's really going to be two takeaways here on this next slide. I mentioned that both Howard and I would give you just a quick look into how we do what we do, and then we're going to get that free copy of Velocity handed off to you, the not for resale NFR copy. We'll get that handed off and give you some best practices on how to test this in your environment. But just a couple real quick things about Velocity before we get into the how we do it. You know, again, it is set and forget software. It installs right into the Windows operating system. Really, it's just a very thin filter driver. You know, it's what we have what it called near zero overhead impact, and we challenge you to even see the CPU footprint. It's enormously lightweight. The CPU resource it does use runs at the lowest priority, and it's never interfering with your server performance. You know, what the software is actually offloading is I/O from the underlying storage, and then at the same time, as Howard mentioned, we're streamlining that remaining I/O traffic, so it's a friendly I/O profile for your storage to process, and it goes much, much faster. Now, we do have two patented engines within the software that you should be aware of. And the first one here is our patented write engine, and the second one is our read optimization engine. And these are two very, very separate things. So, Howard, you know, when we're looking at this, I'm looking at the fact that we want to look at first what's happening with the writes. We'll talk about the reads in just a few minutes. But on the writes, Windows has this issue where it's only looking for the next available allocation at the logical disk layer, whether it's the write serves or not. Now we'll give Windows some credit here, as we mentioned earlier, in the sense that if it's a freshly formatted NTFS volume, we're probably getting ideal I/O performance from day one, but that degrades very, very quickly. And as time goes on and files are written and erased, rewritten and extended, that's where this issue really begins to creep in and degrade. I am getting some echo feedback, and maybe somebody on the line from the presenter side needs to mute. Thanks. But if you're trying to kind of write a file, let me give you an example here. If you have a 64K file and the next available space is only 4K, that's going to use the 4K, fill it up, split the I/O, look for the next available allocation, fill it up, split the I/O, and rinse and repeat until the file is fully written. And there are a lot of I/Os for just that one file, and it's really more than is needed. So, Howard, we have this patented technology that can actually solve that problem and make sure that we are delivering every file with optimal density. So I'd like to ask you to share just a little bit more with us about what kind of intelligence we're adding here that just really kind of encourages this type of optimization within the Windows OS.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. And, as I said before, the file system doesn't really know how big a file creation or extension is going to be. So as you've said, it just looks for the next allocation. Well, we're doing something rather simple. In the background, we're monitoring the system and we're saying, hey, this file type or this application, when it gets created or extended, we know from our behavioral analytics approach that we're monitoring how big a file is going to be. So we're armed with the right information, and we just simply need to feed that intelligence back to the Windows file system. So the file system now says, here comes a file creation. I'm going to look for the best allocation to put this. So it winds up getting a nice sequential write. So we're just providing that intelligence to the file system so it can do a better job. And I like to use this analogy, Jennifer. If you wanted to carry a gallon of water from one place to another, do you do it with 100 small Dixie cups? Or do you think it would be more efficient to carry that water in one big gallon jug and take it from one side of the room to the other and do it all at once? So that's kind of what we're doing here. We're helping the file system enforce that type of behavior. And what you wind up with are nice sequential writes, which is much more efficient and more optimum to process. So hopefully that gives a little more clarification, Jennifer.
Yeah, no, thank you, Howard. It really does. And Howard, maybe I think if we mute you when you're not talking, I think we're getting a lot of feedback echo on my audio to you. We'll try that. Okay, that seems to have worked. Thanks a lot. So I'll get when I prompt you, Howard, I'll give you a little extra time to come off mute. But Howard, you've made a lot of really good points there, and I think what we're really looking at, the takeaway here, is that this intelligence is really helping the Windows OS find the best allocation at the logical layers, since the next available space is rarely, if ever, the right size. But the thing is that, this engine, and we'll get into the benefit and what this engine really does percentage-wise, it's very powerful in its own right. But this is not the only thing we're doing. We do have a second engine which focuses on read optimization, and this is extremely different from the write engine. This is actually a DRAM read caching engine, and what the way I like to phrase this is that we're really establishing a tier 0 caching strategy in your environment. And we're simply leveraging the idle available DRAM sitting there on any given VM or physical server. And we're just utilizing any of that memory that's just sitting there idle and free, that's going unused and otherwise wasted. And we're going to use that portion to serve hot reads. Now, the real genius of this engine is that it is completely automatic. It's dynamic. You do not have to carve out or allocate any memory for this cache. Typically what you have there already on your server that's being unused is more than enough. And if that is and what we're going to do with that portion is basically use it to serve hot reads. And because it is dynamic and scales itself up and down as resources are available, you don't have to worry about any memory starvation or memory contention because of the native intelligence built into this engine. Now, I know sometimes people hear this and they think that when it comes to caching, they need to be, really capacity intensive to take advantage of the cache, but that's just not the case. We have found that with just around 4 gigs of free memory, if we have more, great, but just that alone is often enough time to serve 30 to 50% of all of the read traffic on that VM and offload it from storage. So it's not just always about being capacity intensive, it's really the way that our behavioral analytics engines, the power of them and the efficiency of them, so we can just leverage a little bit of DRAM to do so much. And keep in mind too, with this tier 0 strategy leveraging memory, that reading from memory is 10 to 15 times faster than going down to SSD. So just that little bit can go a long way and have a huge payoff. So, let's go ahead and do a quick demo here of what the software looks like. And I just wanted to remind the attendees today, if you do have any questions, drop them into the Q&A box. We'll answer those at the end. But here's what the software looks like. We're really looking at a UI screen capture of velocity. And you can see here the takeaway. You've got, on the left side, total of 9.5 million IOs eliminated over a 3-week period. This is off of production SQL ERP database that a customer sent to us a screenshot of. The read IOs eliminated, kind of in our sweet spot. We usually average 50%. We go north of that, of course, as you can see here, in the 64% range on this use case. And then write IOs, we're right in the sweet spot. We usually average about 30% on write IOs. You can also see a nice screenshot of our storage IO time saved. And then the next screen that we're going to show you here is really going to show you some of the management capability. Now, there's a lot of in-depth reporting available in our UI. And there's some screens we're not showing you here on the demo real quick, but you've got a central management console you can manage this through. It is a .msi, so you can deploy it through SECM or any other methods that you may use. You can also use our console, and then you can get the centralized global reporting through our console. So really nice manageability and ease of use on this software. And also to install our software, no reboot is required to install or uninstall. Now, let's go ahead and move to the next slide. Okay, great. So, one thing I'm going to say, we're just going to talk a little bit about some customer use cases, and then we're going to go into the handoff of the NFR and the best practices for the evaluation. But, if you are a Gartner client, you can check in with them. They call us the world leader in DRAM read caching, and we don't know for sure, but we think we've sold more caching licenses than any other player in the marketplace over the years, especially with those OEM partnerships that I talked about earlier in our intro slide. So just let me outline 1 or 2 of these kind of use cases with these customers here. We've already spoken about Christus Health in the upper left. In the middle of the screen, a good example is ASL Marketing. I had the good fortune of actually being able to work with them on that deployment and saw these changes myself firsthand. They had a huge import batch job that was supposed to be quote unquote overnight. 27 hours, not quite overnight, right? Millions of records in this thing. And they didn't have it in the budget to rip and replace their hybrid storage with all flash, so they tried their software, reduced it down to 12 hours, 15-hour reduction. And you can just kind of see, casting a glance across this slide, all of those types of results and benefits that these customers have been getting. So let's go ahead and go on to the next slide here. Okay, great. So we're just going to talk a little bit about the best practices for the software. Now we're going to hand off the not for resale copy, the software, to you immediately after the webinar. Our team will go ahead and email that out to you. And if you're going to, this is for you to keep. It is a fully functioning current version, not expiring of the software. It is going to be able to be run on a physical server or a virtual server, whatever is best for you, and it will not shut off, so you can keep this thing. Because ultimately, like I said earlier, the proof is in the pudding. If you're installing this on a SQL server, which we hope you are, and you do not have a memory limit on that SQL server, you'll want to put one on and leave, nice. It'd be nice if you left 8 gigs or a little more. You don't have to have that much, but it would probably be better on the heavier workloads. And then you literally come back and monitor the dashboard and check it out a week later, see what's happening. And we can also get on the phone with you and do a quick analysis as well. So that's really what you want to do. And if we go to the last slide, Dawn, we're going to be wrapping up here in just a moment. So if you go to the last slide here, what we really want to look at is the IO blender effect I talked about earlier. So while installing it on one VM or one server is good, it's much better if you install it on all of them. So what we will also send you, along with the NFR copy that is yours to keep, is we will be sending you a download for our Velocity Management Console. You would be able to spin up a VM, put the Velocity Management Console on it, and from the Velocity Management Console, you will be able to push out trialware, full 30-day trialware to as many VMs as you wish. And certainly one of our engineers can help you out with that as well. So that kind of is a wrap for us. We really are appreciative that you were able to attend the webinar today to learn about our software and technology. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Chris here for a few closing comments on your side, Chris.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, team. And for those of you that are on the call today, please reach out to your national account manager. We're eager to engage with you, help you leverage our engineering experience, and help you solve those problems in the data center, and then more specifically with Conducive. So let us know how we can help you. Thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris, for being here today. And Howard, also thank you for your technical expertise today. So everyone, that's a wrap. And again, thank you for attending, and we'll make sure that you get a recording of the webinar and that you get your software. Thanks again.
Thanks very much, Jennifer.